As now for Battle of Britain. The front cover of The Telegraph runs with "Not enough is being done to help the next generation." That's the Princess of Wales there on her new campaign. Saturday's iPaper. Tories fear mass exodus of MPs before election. Saturday's Guardian. Care charities are forced to evict disabled residents. We'll be covering that in just one moment. And the Financial Times has Qatar rethinks London stakes after ads ban. HSBC froze accounts linked to Tory peer during corruption probe. And Saturday's Mirror, World Cup weary yawn in the USA. Well, that's not a surprise. We're going with Saturday's Times now. Stop tweeting and get on with the job, police told. And Saturday's Express, parents raid pensions to bail out loved ones. And finally, Saturday's Sun, they also have yawn in the USA. Oh, there's also a Daily Star, but it's an identical front cover with an identical headline. And those were your front pages. And we're going to kick off with the front cover of The Mirror. Thea, this one's you. What have you got?
Not a very compelling photo for any of the wags. They have been snapped, 3 of them. England's players Kyle Walker, Aaron Ramsdale, their respective girlfriends have been caught yawning in what was quite a dull draw.
Is that really front cover news? People yawning?
I think the papers are probably so excited that they've thought of this pun. They've all raced to it.
Yawn in the USA. Yeah, this is the same headline on The Sun, The Star and The Mirror.
Yeah, journalistic integrity up here.
It's a criminal lack of imagination, isn't it, Nick? I suppose you've got to find something.
Yeah, you're struggling with a 0-0. I mean, I missed it due to being here. I was invited to a cool World Cup party. It's fine.
Yeah, but, professional.
I'm a professional. And look, everyone's getting a bit worried about it, but we often have a tight game with the United States. United States is a tough team. They're sort of well organised. They're not that great, but they're hard to beat. I thought it would probably be a draw. We're still top of the group, so that's the main thing. We always make it a little bit hard for ourselves, and we were playing Wales next. And USA, you've got to remember, is also a bit of a grudge match as well because of 1776. That's still in the air.
What happened in 1776?
The whole US leaving the whole revolution.
Oh, that thing?
Yeah.
Do you remember? There still residences of that?
Yeah. Oh, massive.
Goodness me, people have long memories. I mean, look, but wags, the wags are what? Girlfriends, wives?
Wives and girlfriends,
Wives
I
and
believe.
girlfriends,
Yeah.
OK. I mean, but it is quite boring, isn't it, football? And I think the point
How
is that...
dare you?
No, from what I understand, the reason why people get so excited about it is that because goals are so infrequent. And so when a goal happens, you get this kind of enthusiasm, this ecstatic nature. Isn't that
We
right?
beat Iran 6-2, Andrew. What are you talking about, infrequent? I love that you're sort of trying to understand football. You sound like Alan Partridge describing a bicycle. It's a kind of piston. You're describing goals from it's like you've read it in a dictionary. You've never seen a football
I've
match.
looked into it. I did some research before the show. And so now I have an understanding of what it is. What I would love to understand is why people care so much about it, but that's,
Because it's our glorious game that we invented, Andrew, and we gave to the world, and we're not that good at, but we're quite good at it at the moment.
It's one of our finest exports.
Are you a massive football fan?
I mean, thank you very much. I take that as a huge compliment.
Okay.
No, I'm not.
No, well, OK. Well, I think we covered that fairly comprehensively. We're going to move on to the Times. What does the front cover of the Times run with, Nick?
Well, they've got "Stop tweeting and get on with the job," police told. This is Stephen Watson, Chief Constable of Greater Manchester.
We've heard of him. He's getting quite a name from himself,
He's proven to be a bit of a legend because he's saying that he wants officers to get on with catching criminals and answering 999 calls. Imagine that.
That won't catch on.
No, a bit like a police force, we could call it. But, yeah, I mean, look, the tide could be turning finally on all this stuff. People are so sick of the police on Twitter. He's calling it fluff and nonsense. He's saying we've got to stop that. He says that, look, we're not good at social media. It's a skill that we don't have, even if we have good intentions. And sometimes he's saying the intention is pure virtue signalling. So he's basically saying back to basics. Stop wearing the Menno vest, if you saw that.
Yeah, I did.
That ridiculous vest where a man thought he had, he tried to emulate the menopause by wearing a hot vest. People are sick of this stuff. And he's saying, let's get back to being an actual police force. And he's apparently massively improved statistics in he brought his area out of special measures in less than 2 years, and the time it takes to answer 999 calls has fallen sharply. So he's doing actual police work.
Right, so Thea, isn't this the point that whatever we might think about this Stephen Watson character, his methods are working? I mean, his police force are doing particularly well because he is adhering to old-school ideas about policing, isn't that right?
I think if there's a net result that any form of crime or any sort of behaviour has changed as a result of someone being in power, you have to look at the net result as opposed to the methodology that they took to get there.
You don't think the methodology there's a causal relationship between the methodology and the result?
No, I think there is a causal relationship.
Right.
So I think he has enough scope in my mind to do whatever he likes.
And do you feel that the police do spend too much time tweeting and telling people not to,
I
not to
personally,
say nasty things online?
I mean, if they're trying to cajole people into behaving better, then that's one thing. But if they are virtue signalling and wasting time and wasting taxpayers' money essentially on social media, I don't want to see it. I want them protecting women on the streets at night. I want them protecting people from domestic abuse. I want them actually doing their jobs, following up on leads. And I don't need to hear about what sandwich you're eating at lunch. I think they need to do their job.
I mean, I suppose that's the point, isn't it, Nick? That a lot of the time that they do tweet about, don't say anything offensive, don't say anything unkind, well, those aren't crimes.
No.
They don't have any scope.
You get these hate crime non-incidents, whatever they're called.
Non-crime hate
Thank
incidents,
you.
which are now a thing of the past.
Yeah, they're nonsense. And that's what he's saying. Look, you don't need to go any further than Peel's principles. It was all in there. He says here, officers should be professional, impartial, and never political. That was all there in Peel's original principle. You don't need any of this stuff. And he says that he insists officers attend every burglary and call out that matter to the public, like criminal damage and antisocial behaviour. This is what people want from the police.
Yeah, of course. Well, it seems like a no-brainer, but there we go. It took us a while to get there. On to the Telegraph now, and a vow from the Princess of Wales. Thea, what's her latest campaign about?
She's determined to improve the lives of under-5s. She's saying that the Princess of Wales, not enough is being done for our future generation, and it's by focusing on this particular demographic, which is obviously our youngest up-and-comers,
yes,
we are protecting the future generations to create a healthier and happier society for them.
Well, that makes sense. But what specifically is she proposing to do in order to support the under-5s?
I think it's mainly to do with their education. The Princess's own Centre for Early Childhood is working to improve the lives of children who care for them, and it's following research which was compiled by a centre highlighting the widespread lack of understanding about the importance of children's earliest years in their development. So, I mean, I completely understand that she has this initiative, but I'm also thinking how many other initiatives there are that are equally worthy of praise.
Well, I suppose you've got to choose something.
You have to choose something. I think in my day we were happy if we got a hot meal, a pat on the head and a potato smiley face.
Yeah,
I mean, that wasn't the same case in my day. I think they just threw us into the sandpit and let's get on with it.
Absolutely. But the vagueness is not Thea's fault. It is actually quite vague. If you read this story, there is really nothing there.
But that's why I was asking.
She's talking about a safe and loving world around the child. But the criticism is there isn't actually much there yet in terms of specifics. But it's good that she's doing something. I mean, obviously our king's a bit obsessed with climate stuff. We obviously had Meghan with the ridiculous self-obsession. But this is why people love the Princess of Wales, because she's focused on children and the future. And it's very selfless and it's very sensible, even though so far it seems to lack a bit of detail, that's all.
Well, I suppose she has a point that those are formative years.
They are,
those first 5 years. And, if you get things wrong there, you end up with serial killers, or like Nick Dixon.
London School of Economics says it costs $16 billion to remedy long-term mental and physical health issues that might have been avoided through intervention. So,
OK, interesting to see what she does next. Anyway, we're going to have a look at the front cover of the Express next. They've gone for a story on retirement funds. So this is pensions.
Yeah, pensions. Yeah, parents raid pensions to bail out loved ones. It's a bit of a tragic story. It's obviously due to the cost of living and so on. And it says that 500,000 people withdrew $3.6 billion from their pension pots. I mean, if they've got $3.6 billion, they're doing all right, aren't they?
Yeah.
But little joke there. Jokette, really. But it says that 24% of people have already accessed or are planning to use retirement funds to help deal with rising living costs. But of course, the problem is there's also the fear that you run out of your pension. You underestimate how much you need. Although in my grandma's case, she was the opposite and sort of hoarded it, never saw any of it. But that's a separate issue. But that generation, sort of the boomer generation and so on, they tend to have more money. And so there is that argument. And Starmer was making an interesting point, which we'll get to later. He was on this Choppers Politics podcast, but he made an interesting point that this could be the first time that the next generation isn't better off, or we don't have that feeling anymore. Yeah. And that is a real problem.
Well, I mean, it's not surprising, is it, that people are dipping into their pensions? Because, of course, it's very easy to misunderstand how important that is. And as this article points out, I mean, it's the former pensions minister, Baroness Altman, is sort of saying that if you take even a small amount out of your pensions now, it's the difference between having a really secure retirement period and having a retirement period in which you have to struggle. And because people are so present tense orientated, and we are in a cost of living crisis, it's not surprising, is it, Thea, that people are going to resort to this?
No, and I think it's so interesting. I mean, Sir Keir Starmer saying that it might be the first time that we have less security in our sort of retirement. I mean, I feel like we're stating the blindly obvious here. We had maybe a 10x in the real estate market where you bought something and then you just happened to become a property millionaire in the 90s and noughties. And it's really very much going to be our generation sort of jointly that experiences this when we get to the age of maybe 55, 60, 65, where we realise that actually the nest egg that we put aside, we will have to continue working.
Well, then, of course, comedians on the whole don't have a nest egg, do they?
There's
they don't
that.
generally do pensions.
On the flip side, we're happy to just continue for working forever until some people literally drop dead on stage. Well, so there is that.
I think the assumption with comedians is that they die young. I think that's the general
Done
assumption.
fast and short. Let's get it done.
That's why I've moved into serious commentary.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're going to move on to the front cover of The Guardian. Thea, what's this about?
So this is actually a rather concerning story. So this is disabled care home residents are being evicted in a dispute between charities and councils.
Right.
So the charity, Leonard Cheshire, have said that they've had to take the drastic step of evicting vulnerable residents with complex disabilities because the council will no longer float the deficit. And they've refused to meet the fee increases. And this is just another iteration of the deepening social care crisis that the country faces.
So it's just a lack of money. But
yeah,
is this a kind of bluff, though? Because when they said they're going to evict these elderly people who need care, it's actually said here that 2 of the notices were rescinded after the council that then said, OK, we'll pay for it. So is it a kind of bluff in order to get the result that they want?
I think in any negotiation you have to be willing to take it to the nth degree, but there are some evictions that have actually been enacted, and those who have been evicted have essentially said, we feel like we're being punished because of the hardball being played between the councils and the charities.
Is it the case, Nick? I mean, this article points out that, they're not going to become homeless because the council and the NHS funder has got a legal responsibility to find an alternative. So it's not the case that it's going to go to those sort of extreme measures. But it does have echoes of the Care in the Community scheme from the 1980s when the Tories just kicked people out and expected the community to come in and step in.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen, does it?
Right, and we have seen recently councils threatened with bankruptcy or actually going bankrupt. And as someone says here, there needs to be an NHS level of funding for social care. Maybe, that is the big problem, is that social care is just underfunded, although some might say that excess immigration is another problem. Not me, of course, but people on the far right might say that, because there's too much pressure on services.
OK. Do you think he's got a point there, Thea? Not his point, he's obviously merely ventriloquising the opinions of others, of the unmentionables.
I think that the pressure that is on our services right now is absolutely beyond belief, and the budget of 200 billion that is for the NHS is not being seen by the people who need it, and that is, we're not going to take any commentary from a story that's coming up about nurses striking, but...
well, we'll come to that in a moment. That is the end for part 1, but if you just hang on for a couple of minutes, we'll be coming back and we'll be looking at whether Kanye West can make a comeback, whether GBNews' own Nigel Farage will be making a political return, and what on earth is happening at Twitter HQ. See you in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
And it's about standards and public life. No, I'll tell you what's hypocrisy, Narendra.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin.
We believe in the UK.
No bias, no censorship.
It just doesn't make sense to me. He wasn't doing his job as Chancellor.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle. I'm taking you through Saturday's newspapers with the comedians Thea Carroll and Nick Dixon. Let's get straight into it. So Saturday's Independent and, well, what's happening now? The Tories are raising taxes and Labour want to cut them. Things seem a bit upside down.
No, it's bizarro world. Yeah, Starmer wants to cut taxes for working people, clobbered by Tories. And this was on the Shoppers Politics podcast. I listened to the whole thing. It's quite funny because, yeah, the Tories have been outflanking Labour from the left for ages. Now Labour are trying to outflank the Tories from the right.
Where do you go in terms of voting at this point?
I know, it's mad. But what Starmer's doing is quite smart. He drops these socially conservative things. He says, just stop oil is silly. He says, let's all sing the national anthem. Let's not go on strike. And it's to try and get as many votes as possible, obviously. The only question is, how is he going to do it? He says, we want to grow the economy. That's the only way we can make progress that we need to make. But how it doesn't quite say how he's going to do it. They asked, is he going to cut the basic rate of income tax to 19p?
Yes.
He didn't say. He did say that the oil and gas profits from the war, 170 billion untapped, unexpected profits, he said we should tax them properly. But what's quite ridiculous is that, you know, he's been hammering the Tories on, like, Liz Truss's mad budget and so on. But then he's saying, you know, we've got the highest tax burden since the Second World War. It's not very conservative. Now he's holding the Conservatives to account for not being conservative enough.
Are you saying that he's spied a gap in the political market? The Conservatives aren't being conservative, so Labour may as well be.
That is what I'm saying. I mean, bizarrely, he also will realise there's a threat from Reform UK, not just to the Tories, but also to Labour.
Right.
And so he's being quite shrewd about it all.
This is the case, isn't it? I mean, he's saying that we need to grow our economy. That seems to be the key message here, which was exactly what Truss was going on about.
I mean, it's the central message all the way through. I think the most startling thing that we have to deal with is the growing debt that we have. I mean, there is no way that we're going to be able to service the increase. I think we're at about 400 billion now or something, casual amount of money. And
it was 44 billion was the whole, the last time I checked the whole. I think that's what it was.
Have I times it by 10?
You've times it by 10, but who cares?
At some point...
When it's that big, it doesn't really matter, does it?
But it slightly does become monopoly money in my mind. I just... how it could ever be repaid.
What do you think about this? I mean, Starmer also saying he's ruling out a Swiss-style agreement with the EU. Right, and Sunak is sort of pushing that through. Total reversal, given that Starmer was the architect of the disastrous second referendum policy that completely scuppered Labour's chances in the last election. So he's just doing a complete about-face.
I mean, he's a politician, right?
Right,
to state the blatantly obvious, but I think Nick made a really valid point. He's going after the reform votes.
Yes,
It's a strategic...
I mean, he says, Nick, doesn't he? We can't afford to make promises that we can't keep. He's learning from the Tories' mistakes there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's very careful. The funny thing about Starmer, though, is exactly what we're talking about. How sincere is he? Because he's actually a Pabloist, which is a strange splinter group of Trotskyism, and he used to edit this magazine, Socialist Alternatives. So he is a radical lefty, but he's also a pragmatist who's trying to win an election. So it's like, which one will... Like, what I'm saying is, will he get in and then secretly do a load of really lefty things? But at the moment, he's obviously trying to capture that socially conservative vote.
Is that a bit like Joe Biden getting in as the non-woke candidate and then pushing through every possible woke idea under the sun?
It's very much like that, if that's what happens.
If it's what happens. I mean, but he's also talking about not allowing the Scottish government to have another referendum and things like that. He's taking a very firm line very early on. I mean, look, it's in the bag for him. I think he is going to be the next Prime Minister, isn't he? Probably.
Ooh,
it does seem that way. When I was listening to this podcast, I did think, yeah, he's definitely going to win, and the Tories are in trouble. We'll get on to that in a minute, whether the Tories will be wiped out.
Well, OK, let's move on to Saturday's Guardian. And for the first time in about a century, nurses are going to be on the picket line.
It's absolutely incredible. So we've had it with barristers, we've had it with teachers, and I think quite understandably, actually, at this point, nurses have said, well, essential workers during a pandemic, we're going to strike. But one thing I will say is that 19% in increased wages, that's what they're asking for. I mean, I understand.
You think it's extreme?
I think it's extreme, but every negotiation, that's like taking someone's opening gambit and splashing it across the papers and saying this was their opening position.
But is it not the case that year on, year out, they have had a sort of a cut in real terms?
Absolutely.
You know,
and so
this is making up for many years of neglect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I personally believe that 19%, if we had the money, absolutely. Pay them, absolutely. They're worth their weight in gold. I mean, they keep this country afloat. The doctors, the nurses, and the people who, you know, return policemen, firemen, all that sort of stuff. But I am also a pragmatist, and I don't know where that extra money comes from, or is it the allocation, the middle management in the NHS that needs to make sure that the 200 billion is going to the right places? But I spent 7 hours in A&E on Wednesday night, and I left without being seen. And understandably, they had to prioritise traumatic cases and resus and ICU stuff. And they are so strung out. They are beside themselves with exhaustion. So if we could give them 19%, I'd want that in a heartbeat.
I mean, isn't that the case, Nick? That of all the people that we should be paying more, I mean, nurses should clearly be a priority. I mean, they're going to be striking on the 15th and the 20th of December, so right at a key moment, a very busy time for the NHS. This could be disastrous, couldn't it?
Yeah, the fact that it's the Royal College of Nursing's first strike in its 106-year history suggests it is a serious situation. I'm sure it's very tough. I mean, this is the most nurses leaving the NHS since 2011. And although 40% of them can't strike due to low voter turnout on the ballot, so they're not allowed to strike. But the only thing I'd say, I don't know if this is controversial, is that inflation is what's driving down their pay in real terms.
Yes.
And you could say, well, the NHS seem to be very pro-lockdowns, and aren't lockdowns a large contributor to inflation?
I don't think they were thinking in economic terms when it came to the lockdown. They weren't.
No. But lockdowns were clearly wrong. I said it at the time. Surely they were just wrong. And the economic cost is one of the many costs of them.
Well,
I'm not saying it means they shouldn't have a pay rise, but I'm just saying it's interesting.
I mean, I think that's a slightly different debate, though, isn't it? I mean, I think we can all agree, can't we, that they have been underpaid for many, many, many years.
For many years, and actually, I was speaking to a friend of mine about this, and his father is a surgeon, particularly for prostate cancer, and he was saying that they're losing so many nurses to agency employment, and then the NHS have a lack of nurses to fill the void, and they hire from agency because they can then make so much more money in agencies. So we have to retain the talent. We have to, in order to ensure that we're going to have any form of staff in the NHS, we're going to have to pay them more at some point.
OK, well, sticking with The Guardian now. Big news from the USA now. A new entrant in the 2024 presidential race.
Yeah, this is mad. Kanye West announced his 2024 presidential bid amid far-right ties. The Guardian said that, although for once they actually are talking about quite right-wing people. So Kanye's launched his bid. He's got Milo Yiannopoulos on board to help him, who had a big part in getting Trump elected in 2016.
Yeah, but that was before the scandal, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was later cancelled for something he said about age of consent and so on, and we don't need to go into that. But not only that, he brought Nick Fuentes in. So Kanye arrived at this meeting with Trump with Nick Fuentes, who's a very controversial online polemicist, has a show called America First. He was banned from flying domestically and internationally at one point. He had $500,000 frozen in his account from an FBI investigation. He was at Charlottesville. He was at the January 6th protest, but not at the going into the Capitol bit. He's a controversial figure.
Some ties with white nationalism.
He's a very controversial figure, and the fact that I'm pretty sure Trump wouldn't have realised he was coming to the meeting, and people have actually tried to deny that Fuentes was at the meeting, but others close to it have said he actually definitely was.
So wait, Fuentes was at a meeting with Donald Trump.
So Kanye came in, he said, I'm bringing Milo with me, and I'm bringing Nick Fuentes in with me, which is kind of a bizarre sort of teaming up. And then Trump was said to have been dazzled by Fuentes. The thing about Fuentes is, if you saw him on that Louis Theroux BBC documentary,
that's where
whatever, he's got his extreme views, but he is very, even The Guardian admitted he was charismatic. He's very funny and charismatic and very smart. So Trump, if he didn't know his background, might just think, who's this guy with this talented young man? And the problem is he's probably going to have to come out and disavow him now because of that. There was a phone call halfway through the meeting, and Trump apparently came back in, and the whole tone had changed. Suddenly he was angry, and he starts attacking Kim Kardashian, and then Kanye's like, that's the mother of my children, bro. And it all apparently just went downhill from there.
What a pantomime. I mean, this does seem ridiculous. Now, the last time that Kanye West said that he was going to run, he retracted it 2 days later, didn't he, on Twitter? So is this something we should take seriously?
Well, I think it's interesting. The strategy at the time, when I think it was 2020, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so it seemed as though this might be mimicking a similar strategy. So as a third candidate for the Republican vote, is he trying to split off perhaps the black vote in America that would perhaps otherwise have been for Biden in a ruse to essentially at the last minute collaborate and throw his weight behind Donald Trump? That was a thought that I had. But I think coming back to the central point, this is a man who incited hatred and violence very recently, and is a very, very, outspoken anti-Semite. And the fact that someone who has, whether it is illegal in America or not, but someone who is able to say those sorts of things and then run for president in the same breath, within the same quarter, it's a really, really damning,
Well,
I think.
isn't he just delusional? I mean, look, the point...
He does suffer from mental health, but then there is a line where if you're suffering from mental health, there is obviously, you have to be well and you have to obviously pass...
Yes.
tests in America as to whether you can actually even run the country and whether he would ever pass that.
He's not going to... Clearly, Nick, he can't...
Well, it's not quite... It may not be as mad as you think in this sense. You could argue Kanye is the kind of reform UK of America. He, along with Milo and people like Nick Fuentes, are going to hold Donald Trump to account to be the kind of radical figure they wanted in 2016. So people like Fuentes were very disappointed with this recent Trump speech, which is rumoured Jason Miller wrote. I know Jason, I haven't been able to ask him if that's true, but it was a much more toned-down, moderate speech, whereas the Milos said, look, this is not what we want. They want the radical Trump of 2016.
But this is the problem with when you have these radical figures and they surround themselves with people who are effectively sycophants and courtiers.
Exactly.
They overinflate their own sense of popularity. And actually, if any of these people run, they're not going to get anywhere.
Well, we're going back to the fact that Kanye said slavery was a choice. Do we think that someone who is making those sorts of claims and completely disregarding hundreds of years, thousands of years of oppression should be on a world stage at all?
Well, I mean, he can run, but I just don't think he's going to be popular.
The question
but he said rappers as role models. We rap, we don't think.
Yeah.
We actually probably make quite a good US president.
The question is not whether Kanye will get the numbers. Like Trump shouted at him in a meeting, you're not going to win. The question is whether he can hold Trump to account and push him more towards the policies that the further right wants, basically. And the other amusing thing is Kanye asked Trump to be his vice president, which apparently didn't go down that well.
That is quite funny, to be fair. Saturday's iNews now, and Nigel Farage mulling a return to politics.
So we've just been talking about this in how Kanye may be the reform equivalent of in America, but Nigel Farage is potentially looking to return to politics with Reform UK, predominantly because the Conservatives rowing over Brexit and migrants and essentially the globalisation Swiss Brexit deal that Rishi Sunak is, Jeremy Hunt is thinking about.
Linking on to what we were talking about earlier,
Exactly.
the Tories are failing in all of their traditional modes of conduct in terms of being conservative. That would be a great thing for a Conservative Party, I think. And clearly, there is now a gap, isn't there, for other people to step in?
Absolutely. I watched the interview with Nigel. I think it was maybe the BBC who were interviewing him, or it maybe even been on GBNews. And he said, I've been on the side. I don't want to have to come into politics. I don't want to have to come do this again. But Nigel Farage's point of view is that he wants to deliver the Brexit that people voted for. Now, my point is, the Brexit that we voted for as a country, that is a thing of the past. We handbrake turned out of the EU with no deal whatsoever. And we are well aware that we're not going to be able to pick piecemeal at what we do want and what we don't want. So the reality that we had at the time of voting for the Brexit referendum is not a reality that we can try and sort of have now.
There was a deal. There was a deal that was agreed.
Yeah, but I don't believe that we can now go back and try and pick and choose.
But that's what the Tories want to do. They want to now create a new kind of arrangement. Labour saying they're not going to do that.
Which leaves the window open for Nigel Farage to go back and say...
Is it really feasible? Because, when you have these third parties come in, there's a limit to what they can do because of the first-past-the-post system. We don't have proportional representation.
Well, exactly. Well, Farage is hoping for a change to proportional representation to
Who's going to implement that?
Well, exactly. He believes that maybe Labour will in some sort of coalition, which Starmer said today they wouldn't. But, so that's one way. But you can also just pressure the Conservative Party to actually be conservative. But it's bound to happen, isn't it? You've got 500,000 net migration per year. That's the equivalent of bringing in a new Liverpool every year. And who wants that, let's be honest? So that's not even including illegal or the gross number is probably more like 1.2 million. So that opens the door to someone like Reform. As you're talking about the Swiss deal, the potential reversal on Brexit. Farage has said the extent of the betrayal of Brexit will determine whether he comes back or not. And, it's just an obvious... And I don't even think Reform are necessarily that conservative. They're probably like Thatcherite liberals with some conservative instincts. But, if the Tories are going to be this left-wing, then, of course, this is bound to happen.
It's interesting times that we live in politically. Anyway, we're going to move on to Saturday's Times now. Have the gates of internet hell been opened?
Well, that is a ridiculous quote from this guy, Matt Navarro, who's some sort of social media consultant, and he's freaked out and triggered by the fact that Elon Musk wants an amnesty for anyone who's been suspended from Twitter who hasn't broken the law or engaged in so-called egregious spam. He put out another one of his polls. 72% said, yes, let's have these people back. Musk once again said, Vox Populi, Vox Dei, the voice of the people is the voice of God. So Trump is enacting democracy, which is something the kind of media cathedral don't like, the kind of big tech, the mainstream media. They don't like democracy, they don't like free speech, but it's a great time. It's a golden era of Twitter, Andrew. My friend Carl Benjamin is back on there, Sargon, Jordan Peterson's back on, the Babylon Bee are back on, all these people are coming back, even Kathy Griffin's back on, so we got one from the left.
Andrew Tate is back on.
Andrew Tate, the top G.
So Thea, let me ask you about this. So you have some reservations clearly about. You don't think that everyone should be let onto Twitter. You think the people who have their accounts nuked while under the old regime, they should remain in the Twitter wilderness?
I think it raises a really interesting point. What I want to see is parity between online legislation and offline legislation. So I want to see the statutes which are enacted for hate speech in person. So if I say something to you which is legally hate speech, there is something that then will have me punished in the court of law.
The problem with that is no one knows what hate speech means. I mean, we've had this poll that Elon Musk put out a graph sort of showing that hate speech impressions have gone down under his era at Twitter. And then there was another poll by a group called Centre for Countering Digital Hate who said the opposite. They said since Elon Musk has bought Twitter, hate speech has gone up. Nobody knows what hate speech means. It just means whatever speech I hate, doesn't it?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, if you take, for example, a case in court, for example, and so many of the cases that I would have studied during my law degree, there is, you can cause assault by your words.
You're talking about incitement to violence.
No. I'm saying, for example, like the definition of assault is the apprehension of spit or landing from your mouth onto my face.
Yes.
So there
Are you saying that's what I just did?
I have a witness. Yeah. No, but I'm saying that in a court
words are different, isn't it? I mean,
words are different. So you're saying the spoken word is different or the written word is different? What I want to see is parity between the spoken word being held up and accountable in the same way that the written word is.
I would be disturbed if I thought the spoken word was being legislated against in court. I mean, that's a real problem. We saw people like Count Dankula has a criminal record because of a joke he told.
No, I'm not talking about policing jokes. I'm talking about people using racist slurs and engendering hate.
But on Twitter, though, some of the people who have been banned have never done anything of the kind.
Yeah, so I'm not saying those people
who either are maybe satirists, who are gender-critical feminists, who have simply said that there are differences between men and women. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that doesn't come under the purview of what I'm talking about in terms of I think there is a massive argument for freedom of speech.
So, Nick, well, on that view, do you take Thea's view that actually when people are saying racist, homophobic, sexist things, they should be banned?
Well, not necessarily, but what I'd say to that is that the hate speech rule was already in place. So when Musk said hate speech impressions have gone down, Jordan Peterson said, what does hate speech mean here? And Musk said, we're just simply going with the extant definition. So the same definition that the previous sort of lefty Twitter had. So that stayed the same. So that's perhaps OK. And that's gone down under Musk. The other thing I'd add is that people aren't talking about Musk's prioritising of stopping child sexual exploitation. This is a massive thing. He said that's going to be priority number one. That's something that prior Twitter never managed to sort out. But all these triggered people saying, oh, it's a terrible... Like AP said that online safety experts, whoever these people are, say that the era of Musk is going to be less safe. Meanwhile, people who are actually worried about child exploitation are saying it's going to be way better. So no one's talking about what a great job he's doing. They're just worried that he's, triggering the libs or something.
OK, well, coming up...
I really hate the word
after the break, we're going to be looking at more censorship on the internet. We're going to look at the dangerous world of deep fakes. And also, does being a backstabber make you a better diplomat? See you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12, on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's newspapers with me, Andrew Doyle, and Thea Carroll and Nick Dixon. So, continuing on the internet theme, we have the online safety bill. Thea, it's finally getting it through Parliament.
So, are we skipping over backstabbing?
Yes, we're just looking at the...
OK. So, this online safety bill is actually seen... first things first, it's taken a huge step forward. This is a safety bill which has seen 4 prime ministers since it was first proposed in 2019. And the general aim of this bill is to protect children and generally make online more safe. And
what do they mean by safe, though? I mean, the problem with this is...
So we're talking about... So the likes of Molly Russell, for example, which was a huge moment in time for, I think, online safety. She was 14 years old, and it took the court a seismic amount of time to go through 6 months' worth of targeted depression, suicidal ideation, and very dark... Instagram was the biggest proponent of content that she watched and she was influenced by. But internet safety campaigners have welcomed the news, as families will as well, essentially saying that we have to do more to protect
Yes, but aren't you slightly concerned that if you give the onus to social media companies and say you have to delete legal but harmful speech, is a phrase that has been bandied around.
Yes, it is.
Then what this will actually mean is that innocuous speech will be banned left, right and centre, and we just have more internet censorship.
So actually, my thought on this, when I was very quickly trying to come up with, salvation for everyone in 10 minutes.
A big claim.
As in just trying to put the world to rights without much forethought. But the minimum age for Instagram is 13. The minimum age to vote is 18, and our frontal lobes are not formed properly until we're 25. So what we're saying is actually, when you go on a, let's say, app like Instagram, which is algorithmically programmed so that it's releasing, you're on a dopamine loop, and you're an incredibly vulnerable and impressionable stage of life, maybe we should be looking at, fine, keeping legal but harmful content so we're not curtailing people's freedoms, but the minimum age for Instagram, that's potentially something that should be increased, because at 13...
Do we need a bill for that? Or do we just need more responsibility from the internet companies?
This is what
Nick,
it is, I think.
Well, the Times said that this gives Ofcom more power than spies, and obviously we're an Ofcom regulated channel. I just want to say I love Ofcom, but that is slightly concerning to me. On the legal but harmful stuff, I heard that's been dropped from the bill, but they're retaining this thing where if you say something that can cause someone serious distress, you potentially can have 2 years in prison.
But that could be anything.
Yeah, so the bill is still terrible, but it's still terrible. I understand it's well-intentioned to protect people. We've seen with Elon Musk, you can do things to protect children without bringing through, legislation like this that risks free speech and massive, overstep that can be abused by activists.
Well, they did drop the legal but harmful rubric from the wording of the bill, but that phrase was still used in the descriptions of the bill by the politicians involved. So it's clear that is the sort of the prism through which they are seeing this.
It is, because during the court case for Molly Russell, the head of health and wellbeing at Meta, I think it was Elizabeth Lagone, she actually defended some of the posts that Molly saw as using that terminology, and that was a really big and divisive point of the case, essentially saying we cannot legislate for stuff that is legal yet still harmful, but what we can legislate for is things that are harmful and illegal. That was the sort of
But Nick
line.
makes the point that, if there are things that could cause depression or distress, but that could literally be anything, because we all have different boundaries and we all have different things that set us off emotionally. So to have such nebulous legislation about speech in a democracy is a problem, because that is open to exploitation, surely.
I mean, I would, if we were talking about banning things that set us off, I would ban me seeing burgers at 8 a.m. in the morning that make me hungry.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We're going to move on now to the Times. And does being a backstabber make you a good diplomat, Nick?
Yeah, this is Backstabbing Robots Excel at Diplomacy board game. So this is a game that's a bit like Risk, if you remember Risk. But it's
Remember it, I play it every year.
Well, yeah, but instead of being based on dice, it's based on questions. This, of course, comes from Meta. Zuckerberg seems to do everything that's sort of evil. It's weird, isn't it? You want to see like Musk to build like counterpart AIs to battle the Zuckerberg ones, because these AIs are basically learning to be deceitful. That's the problem. They're playing this game Diplomacy, and they have questions about where they have to sort of form secret alliances. Like, for example, it'll say, I'm looking to invade the Balkans. Will you put pressure on the Ottoman forces in the Levant? And they've got to decide, what's the best thing to do and work out who might betray them and who might not. Essentially, Andrew, we're teaching robots to be deceitful. It's the most obviously dangerous thing you could possibly do.
So talk to me about this, Thea, because I don't understand why... Look, firstly, this article talks about how AI now beats the top world grandmasters at chess. That's bad enough.
Yep.
But now they're learning how to lie.
Yes.
And they already hate us.
Yeah.
Right? So, what are we doing? We're just obviously sowing the seeds of our own destruction.
We are, but you should be nicer to whatever robot it is that doesn't like you.
Yeah, because
in terms of
it'll
chess,
rule you.
I think it's called Skynet. Yeah.
In terms of chess, I mean, that's a mathematical iteration. There are X many number of potential outcomes, and so fine.
Yes.
When you're talking about winning diplomacy, you're talking about teaching robots game theory. Again, applied mathematics. So we're getting... But there is a hypothetical future point called... There's a theory called technological singularity that posits that we are going to reach a point in time that tech growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible.
Right.
And Professor Stephen Hawking made the point that artificial intelligence or superintelligence probably will result in human extinction.
Yes, exactly. Look, even I know that. I don't know
why we're talking about.
But I know that.
Yes.
Because I've seen Terminator 2 and I've seen how...
Ray Kurzweil's big theory. But look, it says they're building an AI program that can plan, coordinate and negotiate with humans in natural language. It's just not a good idea, is it?
I don't even like this AI art thing, when they have computers creating art. It's not good art, is it? Because it's got no soul. It's nothing.
I would even go one step back. I'm such a cave woman that I don't even like the floor hoovers that...
Oh, those things?
No, because they're mapping your home and that's data that's being given to companies.
Well, also, if you trip over them, I've stubbed my toe on many a...
They are good
no
seats
surprise.
for cats to sit on. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that.
No surprise that far-right Andrew Doyle is against robot rights.
OK, thanks for that, Nick. We're going to move on to Saturday's Independent now. Technology blurring the lines between perception and reality. Who knew? This is deep fake pornography.
Yes.
What's that? What does that mean?
So this is a woman called Kate Isaac who is campaigning against deepfake porn because she discovered some online of herself, which must have been hugely traumatic. And she said it was violating to fall victim to deepfakes, which is essentially her face being put on other people enacting certain acts.
So she's not involved in the actual act. It is a computerised version of her.
So I'm not sure if you've ever seen Tom Cruise's deepfake. There's a man who talks and sings a lot like Tom Cruise, and even Justin Bieber fell for him strumming on a guitar because the deepfake was so convincing and compelling. So you wouldn't potentially know the difference between the person that is...
Right.
It's hugely
But surely that's already illegal. I mean, revenge porn is illegal, so surely mocking up something that can trick people into thinking that it's real, that would also be illegal, wouldn't it?
The government is announcing that distributing those pornographic deepfakes will become illegal as a move of technology, and the legislation is catching up. But technology, as we've just discussed, is moving at such a rate, and our legislature is so slow that it has this sort of chasm in between. But to just go against that, I wonder how long it's going to be before people start using deepfakes as a defence, saying, "Oh no, boss, that wasn't me doing unspeakable things to a plant pot in my office." Deepfake.
That was very specific, suspiciously so. But Nick, don't you think? I mean, this is a no-brainer. You can't make. I mean, this is effectively a way to defame someone, isn't it? To pretend that they were in a that they weren't in.
And it makes it much harder to launch a sex tape to build your career. So that's my concern.
Yeah.
But we've covered this exact story before with Kate Isaac. I'm not sure why it's come back. She set up this Not Your Porn campaign to get non-consensual content removed. So they all targeted her in a horrible way and created these deep fakes as revenge. So it's horrific.
Unpleasant stuff. OK, well, that's the end of this section. But coming up, is it time to rethink our relationship with Alexa? Is it wrong to be a crusader at the World Cup? And have we been getting water all wrong? Find out what on earth that means in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
I think I've seen probably quite enough of Matt Hancock to last me a lifetime.
I'll also be getting to know you better, travelling to find out what you think about the politicians who are fighting for your vote.
They've got to get this country back on track.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. only on GB News, on TV, radio and online.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
And welcome back to the final part of Headliners with me, Andrew Doyle, and Thea Carroll and Nick Dixon. We're going to crack on with the Times, and the French have been experimenting in the world of contraception.
They have, and so men have been busy sewing underpants with codpieces, essentially, and they're calling it codpiece de résistance.
What does it do, this codpiece?
They're terming it like a push-up bra for your nether regions, but actually it's quite dangerous. So it's being done as a reaction to how men haven't essentially maybe taken responsibility historically in France for contraceptive methods.
Yes.
And up until, I think it was maybe about 2001, Napoleonic law actually forbids self-mutilation, so you were not allowed to get vasectomies. This is taking it into a very extreme space and saying, essentially, it can render you infertile.
Oh.
Yeah, so it changes the temperature, the restriction, the pressure. So this is bordering on genital mutilation for the purpose... I mean, if this isn't natural selection at work, I don't know what is.
Why would you need a contraceptive underpant, Nick? Why not just use contraception?
There's so many good ideas there, Andrew. This is why I don't trust the French. This is what Brexit was all about, controlling our borders, and we're not allowed to even control our underwear. This is, I mean, this was invented in the 1970s, apparently, and first tested on a herd of rams.
No.
That's
So this goes back into Tudor times.
Okay.
Henry VIII.
No, the latest technique, it says, with this... carry on.
Well, the codpiece goes back to Tudor times.
Yeah, absolutely. Henry VIII
wasn't designed to make people infertile.
No, it wasn't. It was done actually to draw attention because the style, the sartorial sort of trends of the moment were to their smocks would stop here. And if you've ever looked at Henry VIII, the portraiture around it, his codpiece, he's chosen maybe a slightly larger size than he had necessary to choose. So
it's a status thing.
It is a status thing. It was never meant to be a nether region punishment.
This is a very odd idea, and I think we should move on immediately. Saturday's Telegraph now, and are humans using tech for the right reasons? I think this is the Alexa story.
Yeah, why our relationship with Alexa is on the blink. So Alexa department has lost as much as $1 billion a month, although Amazon is saying the interactions have increased more than 30%. But the idea was it was meant to be this revolutionary thing. We're going to be living like the Jetsons, but instead they're saying people are using it as a glorified clock radio. You know, they get it to do a few tasks that they can't bother walking across the room to do. But yeah, I think it's dangerous, Andy, especially once we've already established earlier that robots and AI are becoming deceitful. Do you really want this deceitful assistant in your home, or potentially deceitful?
Alexa, I mean, it's already listening all the time, isn't it?
That's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we don't really want it, do we?
Well, I elect not to, because then there's going to be a record of quite how mad I am.
Right. Well, I mean, they claim there is no privacy issue, that Alexa doesn't listen. It just listens for its own name, and then it turns on.
It has to log to listen.
Right.
So in the ether, there are transcripts of everything you've ever said, every noise you've ever made. And there is a comment here that scientists have cottoned onto the scatological bent of the world's youth. Basically, they're leaning it towards the voices of children so they can scream, Alexa, play Baby Shark one more time. And then
that's creepy as well.
Will selectively tune out you saying, no, Alexa, in a slightly more dulcet, lower
the computers are going to
voice.
The robots are going to take what they learned from that diplomacy thing, gather all your data, then use all the information against you and say, well, what about what you said on June 16th, Andrew? You see where it goes?
Right. Not having this. Get rid of your Alexas. That's the moral of this story. Saturday's Mail now. And we're on to a story about the Queen. What's this about, Thea?
Oh, God rest her soul. So this biography is shedding light on the Queen's stoicism in her last months.
This biography by Giles Brandreth, which is called Elizabeth, An Intimate Portrait. And, of course, he's friends with the royal family, isn't he?
He is. He occupies a unique position as friend and royal biographer. Essentially, in the words of the then Duchess of Cornwall, now the Queen Consort, who also spoke to the author, she said her mother-in-law was absolutely unstoppable. And I don't know if any of you have mother-in-laws, but they usually are. But to give the Her Royal Highness, obviously, her dues, she absolutely carried on like a stalwart of... She was just a bastion of strength. I mean, she didn't stop. She was the second longest reigning monarch in history, I think only surpassed by a Thai monarch. She reigned for 70 years and 214 days or something. And she was told to stop, to slow down, and she carried on pushing through and pushing through.
And that's what this biography is revealing, those sort of details.
Exactly, the sort of archetypal British stoicism that she surpassed.
OK, we're going to move on quickly to the Times now. Who would have thought that dressing up as crusaders might not go down well in the Middle East?
Yeah, England fans dressed as St George, strip searched by police at World Cup. This is outrageous. They said they just wanted to humiliate us. They said, are you here to kill Muslims? And they said, no, we're just here to have fun and watch football.
But they dressed like in armour?
Yeah, they were St George. They had the sort of crosses, the swords, they had toy swords, they had the whole chainmail, the whole shebang, Andrew.
Right.
And then they were horribly humiliated. They got into the ground late. They were strip searched. And what Qatar needs to wake up to is football bants, because that's what this is. It's like the Americans, the game tonight, there were Americans, you know, and their chants are sort of like, we're America, we love soccer. And our memes are like, planes going into the buildings at 9/11 and saying we're going to stuff the Yanks. And Qatar just needs to get with it. That's part of our football culture, is dressing up like it's the Crusades and going over to the Middle East.
British football culture.
Well, it's inspired by Monty Python, and what I was really looking forward to was, if that was their inspiration from that part of Monty Python, I wanted to see the outfits that came out of Monty Python's song, Sit on My Face and Tell Me That You Love Me.
Goodness me, we're going to have to move on. This is the final story of the night, and this is about water. What's going on with water, Nick?
Well, drinking 8 glasses of water a day is too much, Andrew. We always have this. We have, like, trans fats, we have cholesterol. Eggs are bad, then they're good. So that's like 2.8 litres of water a day. It turns out you only need 1.5 to 1.8. And it's just this classic thing. They always change it. But anyway, I'm like Andrew Tate. I only drink sparkling water because tap water's for broke boys.
Goodness me. Look, this thing about water, I mean, it does get a bit annoying when scientists say, no, you can drink as much water as you want. Actually, no, you shouldn't drink very much. Oh, you can eat as much as cabbage as you like. Actually, cabbage will kill you. They don't know what they're talking about, do they?
Well, it's really difficult because actually what we're taking are sensationalised headlines from usually not necessarily controlled or insured, random controlled trials, and they are very sensationalist. They are not necessarily founded in science. And so when you get nutritional headlines, I could go on about this for years.
Well, I'm afraid we don't have years. That's actually all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests, Nick Dixon and Thea Carroll. Tune in when tomorrow's headliners with Steve N. Allen, who's going to be joined by Josh Howie and Kelvin McKenzie. And if you're watching on Catch Up, next we have Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it. but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover